entitled The Spread or Adoption of the Planetary Week. We see that today people have confused the Sabbath. And in the time of Paul, the Hebrews had their Sabbath. The Sabbath here was based upon a lunisolar calendar. It was based upon the 7-day Sabbath. Remember, Yahuwah had given us numbers of days, not named. So first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, and the 7th day, he called it the Sabbath day. Hence the reason he said, remember the Sabbath and keep it Kadash. So the only day that was named was the 7th day and it was called Sabbath. But as time went by, the people now came into being with this planetary cycle. And they introduced a planetary cycle to the people. And as such, many people tell you now that, from ever since from creation, the 7th day was always the Sabbath. It was the Friday, Saturday, Sabbath. And they will tell you that in the time of Maccabeus, that they were attacked on the day of Saturn. And because they were attacked on the day of Saturn, they say that that was the day, it was the Sabbath day. They also say that Yahushua Mashiach, J-U-S-U-S, that he kept the Sabbath. And they say the Sabbath was the Saturday. You see? They went on to say that throughout the entire world, the language of Sabbath is the same. Because throughout the world, you would see Spanish refer to it as Sabado. Others again would say it is the Sabbath, it is Shabbat, and all different things they call it. So they tell you that based on the language of the world, in numerous cultures, the Sabbath was made mention of as the Saturday Sabbath. Therefore, anyone else who says the Sabbath is different from that is wrong. But while in 1st century, after the death of Yahushua Mashiach, remember, the Sabbath now took on another form based on a planetary week. And then you had now contending for 2 Sabbaths. One said that the Sabbath is the Saturday, Saturn's day, and another now said, well, based upon the resurrection, he resurrected on the 1st day. So because he resurrected on the 1st day, what we will do now, we will transfer the ordinances, we will transfer the whole system of worship from the 7th day to the 1st day. So that's how you get a 1st day worship and a 1st day Sabbath. But the thing about it is, both parties are wrong. Because Yahuwah said to us that we must not worship the sun, the moon, the stars. And all planetary days, named days, is in honor of some god. And not only that, but they also partake of the food of the gods. So partaking of the food of the gods, that's why at Christmas they eat their pork. They will eat pork again for Easter and these different things. Because it is in honor of their god. Augustus Vespasian attacked the Jews on the day of Saturn, on which it is forbidden for them to do anything serious and profane. Right? So, Frontiers wrote about 1970 CE, and the fact that he designated one of the 7 days by the name of Saturn revealed that his readers were already familiar with the use of the planetary week. And this is important, because it says here that even back then in 97 CE, that they already were familiar with the term and definition of Saturn. Why? Because remember, we will look at it from the perspective of Constantine changing certain days and implementing the planetary week. But it was not 100% correct. Why? Because yes, Constantine, as a Satan worshipper, he also adopted this concept. But long before, in the time of Ptolemy, that is Greek, the Greco-Roman culture was that they embraced the worship of the moon gods, because remember this came from Egypt and Babylon. Now the thing about it is Egypt and Babylon did not have names of days for the week, but they had names for their months. So their pagan gods were called by names. For example, both in Babylon and Egypt, the names of their month and the planetary gods, you had Nabu, you had Ishtar, Nigral, Marduk, and Nineveh. All came down to us through Greek and Romans in their classical equivalent, being called Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. There was no planetary order, meaning names of days and weeks, until much later, when they developed the septenary cycle of a 7-day week. Now, and what they have done, they always try to use some kind of Gnostic wisdom or intelligence, in that they always try to use numbers and names in everything they do. For example, hear what they said. The 7 lights on the menorah was symbolic of the 7 great lights in terms of the planets. So they had 4, which was symbolic of the 4 seasons. You had the 12 apostles and the 12 tribes of Yashar. They take that to say, well, that's the 12 zodiac signs. So you see how they're playing with numbers and names. So they work that, and now they work the 7 lights on the menorah to say that this is symbolic of the 7 planetary gods, who are the great lights. But I will read something for you in a while. But we must never forget what I taught you as it relates to astrotheology. Because remember, when the wise men went to Herod, he asked them what was the exact time they saw the star. So these people had it down packed to a science as in terms of the study of the stars and the positioning of the stars. And when we look at the astronomical reasoning behind the order for naming of the days of the week and these different things, in Asia, a Sunday was called the day of the sun. Moon day was called the day of the moon. Tuesday, the day of Tuesday, and then Wednesday was Odin, etc. And of course, the THUR was in honor of Jupiter, who is called Jove, and he is also called Thor. So the whole thing about the sun, when we look back at Malachi 4:2, where they talk about that the Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in his wings, the sun, the S-U-N. So it was way back in 2nd century. I'm talking about 2nd century BC, because they adopted that. That was happening all before. When they came out of Babylon, if you remember, they changed it from number of days and number of months, and they started giving it pagan names like Abib and different things. So the fact of the matter is, you are seeing the correlation in respect to when the people came out from Babylon, from Egypt, and these things. But up to that point in time, there was no name of days for the week. It was much later on that this came into being, in the time of Ptolemy of Greece. So by the time we reached Constantine, it was knowledgeable, it was understood that Saturn's day was now the day of Saturn and not the weekly Sabbath of creation. The weekly Sabbath of creation can fall any day of your week. Who knows if at that point in time it fell on this day of Saturn and they believed that was the order of things. I'm saying to you, the 7-day Sabbath of creation based on Yahuwah's lunisolar calendar, it is completely different from the solar calendar that they use to get a Sunday Sabbath and a Saturday Sabbath. We must never forget also that astrotheology speaks about the worship of the heavenly hosts. And that is why they use the SUN and the SON of GD interchangeably. The consecration of a particular day to a divinity was a common feature of polytheism, of all the nations that worship pagan gods. It was a common feature. And in the time of Planetary, we must also remember, Mithraism was prevalent. And Mithraism was where they had the philosophy of the seven candlestick, the light of the seven candlestick, as that of the seven planets. All of that coming out from Planetary and the Roman Empire. And when you talk about the worship of the heavenly hosts, you are speaking about astrology. And we have said it over and over, that Christianity have adopted, they have embraced this pagan astrotheology concept of the worship of the heavens, and they don't know. Some of them honestly don't know. They believe that the 7-day Sabbath is the Sabbath of creation, the 7-day Sabbath that they are here to. But both in Babylon and in Egypt, we know that they changed a lot of things. Allow me to read from the Rest Day by Hutton Webster. Talk about the Forgotten Books, page 260. He said the Planetary Week as an institution has spread eastward over the Oriental world and westward into Europe. It is a product of the speculations of astrologers and philosophers during the Hellenistic period or the Greco-Roman era. The sequence of its days depended ultimately upon the order of the 7 planetary spheres adopted by Planetary. Moving on to page 290. The earliest evidence of planetary meaning of weekdays is found, of course it was found on 2 inscriptions from Pompeii, but it made reference of how they reckon the calendar. You had A to G, and then they had A to H. And it says here, it made mention of these, the first gave all the names of the planetary deities in their Greek form, and the second, the names in their more familiar Latin form. So you have the names in Greek form, and you have the names in the Latin form, except for the accidental omission of Wednesday. So you have Saturni, you have Solis, you have Luni, you have Lune, you have Martis, you have Jovis. Now again, the name Jovis, Greek 22 for the name Jupiter. And while we talk about Jovis, I've been looking more and more about this name Jovis, because Jovis speaks to Thor, Jovis speaks to Jupiter, and after Jovis it had Veneris. Indication that the planetary week was known and used during the 2nd century CE. It occurred in both in classical literature and the inscription. Diocaius, writing early in the 3rd century, between 210 and 220 CE, declared that the custom referring the days to the stars, called planets, had then become quite familiar to the Romans as well as to the rest of humanity. Jupiter is called Zeus. So to the Greek, he is called Zeus. To the Romans, he is called Jupiter or Jupiter or Joe. Now remember, we have the name Jehovah, and I've been watching that name over and over, and I looked at it and I put a dash between the J, and by spacing it, what you had, J or Jo, Ov, and if you add an AH behind it, what you get? Phonetic sound. Jehovah, Jehovah. So it shows that the name Jehovah is an abbreviated form for the name Jehovah. Because Jehovah is Jupiter, Jehovah is Zeus. And we keep telling the people that. Because based on our scripture in Acts 19:27 and 35, he said that not only this our craft is in danger to be set at naught, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all of Asia and the world worship. And if we look at it and we see that Asia had embraced the planetary week, so they now said that the Sunday was referred to as the day of the sun in which they worship. So the day of the sun, where the people worship the sun, now became Sunday. And Sunday now they give it honor in honor of who? Who does their worship go to? Their worship go in honor to the sun god. It says here in 35. And when the town clerk had appeased the people, he said, You men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not that the city of the Ephesians are worshippers of the great goddess Diana and of the image which fell down from Jupiter? So if Jupiter is Zeus, and there is an image that fell from Jupiter, image speaks of a teraphim, an idol that can perform miracles, signs, wonders, and give people wisdom. And this image has to come in the name of its father. So if the father is Zeus, whom all the world worshipped back then, because Zeus was also seen as a great light. That's why they refer to him as a light bearer. Jupiter, the father of lights. They refer to him as the father of lights. Can you imagine that? A title for Yahuwah, they now take it and give him. Why? Because they say that this star is one of the brightest stars that it has. That are Venus. So, this light now that would light the world, the light that would come unto men, they shift that focus from Yahushua Mashiach and they now put it to J-U-S-U-S, Jesus. Zeus, Jesus, Jesus. And they cannot see for 1 minute that they are worshiping the image that fell from Jupiter, which is Jehovah, and the son of Jehovah is also called Jesus. So it is plain, if they have the slightest common sense, they can make the connection and see it. But they don't want to. So moving on, they say the early believers, Christians that is, had at first adopted the Jewish 7-day week with its numbered weekdays. So how is it that the early believers, so how they say now that the early believers worship Saturn based on the same day that they attack the Maccabees? But here the scripture says that the early believers, that is in the time of first century, when Yahushua Mashiach died, the early believers adopted the Jewish 7-day week with its numbered weekday. So it means that they were observing the Hebrew calendar. The Hebrew calendar, and not this planetary week solar calendar that the world embraced. He said, but by the close of the 3rd century CE, this began to give way to the planetary week, and in the 4th and 5th century, the pagan designation became generally accepted in the western half of Christendom. The use of the planetary names by Christians attests to the growing influence of astrological speculations introduced by converts from paganism. So it shows that they embrace what? Astrology. Astrology is tied in to Christianity and the entire gospel. So that is why they observe the Jesus' birth on December the 25th in honor of their pagan gods. The old belief in the power of the stars over human destinies lived on in Christian communities. The heavenly bodies, though no longer deities, were still demons capable of affecting the fate of man. And during this same century, the spread of sun worship, especially that of Mithraism, in the Roman world had already led to the substitution by pagans to Deus Solis for Deus Saturni. So the shift moved from the day of the sun, which is Sunday, to the day of Saturn. That is what they say in there. But the spread of the solar worship, especially in the time of Mithraism under Greece, they say that the Roman world had already led to the substitution. So they moved from the first day of Yahuwah's Sabbath, the Sabbath of creation, to now embrace a Sabbath based on the day of Saturn. And it was after now that the Greek now came up and said, look, we want our own religion based on Constantine. And they now said, based on the resurrection of the first day, we will make the first day a Sabbath. So that is how you have the pagan world having two Sabbaths. One on a Saturday, one on a Sunday. And what is ironic, one saying to the other, you worshiping on a Sunday, thy devil worship, you going to hell. But you worshiping on the Saturn's day cannot see that you are walking after the same order of astrotheology. It went on to say, Constantine's famous edict, as we have seen, definitely enrolled Sunday among the holidays of the Roman state religion. That when it changed, it made Christianity a legal religion, and he legalized Sunday as the day of worship. The day of the sun now became a time that the sun was venerated. Venerated is to worship. So the sun, it had always been about the worship of the S-U-N. And they make you believe, no, they know the S-U-N, their sun, S-O-N, their sun now is different from our band name. Our band which talks about sun, that's why he said that in John 5:43, that I have come in my Father's name and you receive me not. Because the true band came in the name of Yahushua Mashiach, carrying the Father's name Yahuwah. This son, he came in the name of his father, Zeus, who is referred to as the Father of Light, or a light bearer. He also comes saying that he is the great light. And he is the great light because why? He is pointing them to the sun, because Zeus is worshipped as the sun god. So the sun now is also worshipped as the sun. As the sun. So it went on to say here, the change from Saturn's day to Sunday must have further commended the planetary week in the Christian circle. So it further solidified that planetary week. And that's why when you go back to some of the research material there, you will see the Pope and them asking, by what authority, whose authority did they change the Sabbath from the Saturday to Sunday? On whose authority? You see, the church is above the Bible, and this transference of the Sabbath observance from Saturday to Sunday is proof positive of that fact. The Catholic board, it is always somewhat laughable to see the Protestant churches in pulpit and legislation demand the observance of Sunday, of which there is nothing in their Bible. But yet they continue to proclaim that Sunday is a day that they worship. Where in the scripture did Yahuwah give them that authority to move from the 7-day Sabbath to a Sunday Sabbath? or Sunday worship. Nowhere. It was clearly given by that from Rome. It went on to say that change from the Saturn, and this, of course, they say the Saturn's day. So they deceived the people to believe 7th day is Saturn's day. So they say the change came from the Saturn day to Sunday in Christian circle, where the day of the Lord was the beginning of the week and had long been observed as that of which is Christ, the Sun of righteousness, who rose from the dead, and thus gradually a pagan institution was engrafted into Christianity. I'll read that again. Thus gradually a pagan institution. Remember I said to you that the planetary week is a what? It is an institution, a pagan institution. That's one of the first things I read for you. And here again he's saying that thus gradually a pagan institution was engrafted in Christianity, and the planetary week became familiar to the barbarians of the West before its adoption by Christianity. They have deceived the people big time. From 3rd century to 8th century. All between, from the time that the apostles' eyes were closing, from that time they were always there, but they were looking to move away. But by the time 2nd century into 3rd century, that was it. The people embraced a planetary week. Go to Exodus chapter 23, verse 30. That is why when the people reject Yahuwah's counsel, to say that, oh, thy Old Testament, in the Old Testament, in the Tanakh, Yahuwah admonishing the people. He said, in all things that I have said unto you, be you circumspect, be wise, and make no mention of the name of other gods, of other mighty ones, neither let them be heard out of thy mouth. If the Babylonians and the Egyptians, if they worship the pagan gods by virtue of this constellation, by virtue of the zodiac signs, they had pagan gods. And remember, their gods, those pagan gods, they were only called by the month. It was after a while, it moved from the month to now weekly pagan names. So Yahuwah said, make no mention of the names of other gods, neither let them be heard out of the mouth. And yet the people, when they came out of Babylon, they started calling the first month by pagan names, second month pagan name, and so on, until they reached to the place that they started now naming the name of the days of the week. So in Hebrews 4, verse 3, shows the characteristics of the sanctuary of Yahuwah, the house of Jacob, Yahuwah's sanctuary. He said, for we which have believed do enter into his rest. So we are no longer rebelling from Sabbath, but we know now that the characteristics of Yahuwah people is to keep the Sabbath, is to cease from all activity. Yahuwah's word will always stand in. Because the parable of the sower that sowing the corn, some fell on rocky soil, some fell on the rocks. So at the end of the day, if you don't guard the word, the devil will come and steal the word. And when he steals the word, that is why many have a form. They profess to be Hebrew, but the lifestyle, the conduct, the passion does not align to the house of Jacob.